He wasn't supposed to speak. For 15 years, Jamal mopped the same hospital floors, ignored by the same doctors who never saw the brilliance behind his tired eyes. But one night, under the cold fluorescent lights of the ICU, a powerful man's son was dying, and every specialist in the building was out of answers. Then, from the corner of the room, the janitor whispered 5 words that stopped time itself. No one believed him. No one even looked his way. But what if the one person they dismissed was the only one who could save a life? Jamal's nights followed a rhythm only silence could understand. The steady squeak of his cleaning cart echoed through the halls of St. Gabriel's Hospital long after most had gone home. To everyone else, he was just the janitor, an old black man with kind eyes and worn shoes, invisible in plain sight. But behind that quiet presence lived a mind once trained to heal. 15 years ago, Jamal had worn a white coat, not a uniform. He'd studied medicine, excelled, and dreamed of saving lives. But dreams fade fast when opportunity depends on skin color. Doors closed. Interviews ended with polite smiles. Now, at 68, he swept the floors of the same institution that once rejected him. He never complained. His dignity remained untouched, even when residents brushed past him without a glance. Each night, he cleaned the operating rooms as surgeons celebrated another successful procedure, never knowing the man mopping up after them could have taught them half of what they knew. But on one stormy night, when power flickered and panic filled the air, those same doctors would find themselves lost, desperate, and helpless. And the man they never saw would become the only one who could see what they couldn't. The hospital never slept, but that night, it felt haunted. Alarms echoed through sterile hallways as doctors rushed from one room to another, panic etched across their faces. A child, 8 years old, was dying in the ICU, his body failing faster than medicine could explain. The boy's father, a powerful man with a reputation that made even police chiefs nervous, stood outside the room demanding answers. But none came, not from the doctors with gold name tags, not from the specialists flown in from across the city. Jamal had seen many emergencies, but something about this one felt different. He watched from the shadows, his mop bucket still and forgotten. The boy's monitors flashed warnings like a heartbeat running out of time. Jamal's trained eyes caught patterns in the vitals, subtle clues only someone who once practiced medicine would recognize. His heart clenched. He knew what it was. He had seen it before, years ago. But how could he speak? To them, he was just the janitor, someone meant to stay silent and unseen. In the conference room, 12 doctors gathered, arguing over charts and test results. Bacterial infection, one said. Autoimmune disorder, another guessed. Their voices blended into noise. Jamal stood outside the door, listening, his mind racing with the diagnosis they were missing. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from anger. The same quiet rage that had followed him since the day he was told he'd never fit in to prestigious medicine. He wanted to walk in, to tell them what they couldn't see, but he remembered how they looked at him before. Dismissive, superior, certain that a man with dark skin couldn't possibly know more than them. Then, a voice cut through the chaos. The boy's father shouted from the hallway, slamming his fist against the wall. 12 hours, and you still don't know what's wrong with my son? His threats carried the weight of power and fear. The doctors avoided his eyes, muttering excuses, hiding behind medical jargon. Jamal's chest tightened. He couldn't watch this unfold. Not again. When the lead doctor stepped out for coffee, Jamal slipped into the room quietly. The chart lay open on the desk. The data confirmed his fear. It was a rare inflammatory disease, one that needed treatment immediately. If they waited, the boy's heart would fail within hours. Jamal felt his pulse race. He had 2 choices: stay silent and watch a child die, or speak and risk losing everything. He took a step forward, clearing his throat. "Doctor," he said softly. The young resident looked up, irritation flashing in her eyes. "This area is restricted. You shouldn't be here." Jamal's voice shook but carried conviction. "You're missing something," he said. "Look at the fever cycles, the rash patterns. It's not infection. It's systemic inflammation." Laughter rippled through the room. One doctor smirked. "Are you giving medical advice now? Maybe you should focus on cleaning the floors." The humiliation hit him like a punch, but Jamal stood his ground. "You don't have time to argue," he said, his voice rising. "That boy will die if you keep guessing." Security was called. Two guards, men he'd worked beside for years, grabbed his arms. As they dragged him away, the doctors whispered behind him, mocking the crazy janitor. Jamal's head hung low, but his eyes burned with defiance. Through the ICU window, he saw the boy's father break down, holding his son's lifeless hand. Jamal whispered under his breath, "I know what's wrong." The words were barely audible, but they carried the weight of truth. And though no one heard him, the clock was still ticking. And Jamal knew he couldn't stay silent for long. The air inside the ICU felt like it was holding its breath. Machines beeped in frantic rhythm as the boy's heart rate spiked again. The doctors huddled near the monitors, arguing over numbers, still lost in their pride. But outside that room, Jamal stood frozen between fear and purpose. He could still hear the guards' voices in his head, their laughter echoing down the hall as they threw him out. "Stay in your place, Jamal." Those words had followed him his entire life. But this time, he refused. He turned back toward the ICU, determination hardening in his chest. The boy didn't have much time left. As Jamal pushed open the door, the Mafia boss turned sharply, rage and despair in his eyes. For a moment, the two men just stared at each other. The powerful father who could destroy lives with a word, and the janitor who'd spent his life being invisible. Then Jamal spoke, his voice calm but unshakable. "I know what's wrong with your son." The room fell silent. The doctors froze, stunned that the janitor had dared to interrupt. The lead physician's face twisted with fury. "Get him out of here right now!" But before the guards could move, the boy's monitor shrieked. His pulse dropped dangerously low. The father's expression changed from anger to raw terror. "Do something!" he yelled. Jamal stepped forward, his trembling hands steady now. "If you don't listen to me, he's going to die in minutes." Every eye turned toward him. In that moment, Jamal wasn't just a janitor. He was a man reclaiming the voice that racism had tried to silence. He explained the symptoms, the fever pattern, the swelling, his words cutting through decades of prejudice. The doctors hesitated, but the father didn't. "Let him talk," he said, his voice deadly calm. Now, as Jamal spoke, the pieces clicked into place. The realization spread across the room like a shockwave. The janitor was right. For the first time in years, Jamal was seen for who he truly was. The boy's life hung by a thread. The treatment had to start immediately, and as the doctors finally followed Jamal's lead, one question echoed through every mind in that room. How many lives had been lost before this moment, simply because the right voice came from the wrong color? The silence that followed felt sacred. Hours after the chaos, the boy's monitor now showed a steady heartbeat. The color had returned to his cheeks, his breathing calm and even. Doctors who once mocked Jamal now stood in quiet disbelief, their pride stripped away by the truth they could no longer deny. The janitor they ignored had saved the life they couldn't. The father, once feared for his power, walked to Jamal, his voice trembling. "You saved my son," he whispered. Jamal simply nodded. For him, it was never about recognition. It was about doing what was right, even in a world that had refused to see him for decades. News spread through the hospital like wildfire. Staff members whispered in awe, others in shame. Some avoided eye contact, unable to face the reality that prejudice had nearly cost a child's life. Jamal didn't gloat. He just went back to work, quietly mopping the same floors where his brilliance had once been dismissed. But something had changed. This time, people moved aside when he passed. not out of fear, but out of respect. Weeks later, the hospital board invited Jamal to speak. They called it a case study in overlooked talent. But Jamal knew what it really was, a mirror held up to a system built on inequality. For years, he said softly, I've watched people judge others by their uniforms instead of their knowledge, by their skin instead of their soul. Today, a boy lives because someone finally listened. His words hung heavy in the air, impossible to ignore. Jamal never asked for titles, only the chance to be seen as human. And that's the tragedy of it all. How many voices like his are still unheard, waiting in silence, holding knowledge the world refuses to see? Maybe the real illness isn't what put that boy in the ICU. Maybe it's the blindness that still lives in us all. Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.